The cold morning air over Berlin in early 1944 carried a deceptive sense of calm. For years, the heart of Germany had felt like a fortress, protected not just by anti-aircraft guns, but by simple geography. The logic was comforting and mathematically sound. Allied bombers could reach the city, but their fighter escorts, the smaller planes that protected them, could not. They simply didn't have the fuel. This meant that once the bombers crossed a certain invisible line in the sky, they were vulnerable. They were alone. High above the clouds, German commanders stood on the balconies of their headquarters, or sat in the quiet safety of their offices, sipping warm coffee. They believed in the limitation of their enemy's technology. They believed that no single-engine fighter plane could fly from England to Berlin and back again. It was a physical impossibility. This belief was their shield. It allowed them to sleep at night. It allowed the Luftwaffe pilots to wait until the bombers were deep inside German territory before attacking, knowing the slow, heavy bombers would be easy prey without their little friends to protect them. But on this particular day, the sound of the sky changed. It wasn't just the deep, rhythmic drone of the heavy B-17 bombers. Mixed into that low rumble was a higher pitch, a smooth, whistling roar that cut through the thin air. High above the city, sunlight glinted off something new. It wasn't the dark, camouflaged paint of a bomber. It was silver, polished aluminum shining against the blue backdrop. It was a silhouette that shouldn't have been there. A slim, elegant fuselage. Squared-off wingtips. A large intake scoop underneath. To the German observers on the ground, and the pilots in the air, it looked like a ghost. It was the P-51 Mustang. And it wasn't just passing through, it was hunting. At that moment, the invisible wall that had protected Berlin for so long simply evaporated. The realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. The Americans had solved the impossible math of distance. The secret to this new dominance wasn't just a bigger engine or a larger wing. It was a triumph of engineering ingenuity that sat quietly beneath the wings of the silver birds. They were called drop tanks, large, teardrop-shaped containers made of paper and metal, filled with extra fuel. These tanks allowed the Mustangs to sip fuel gently while crossing the Channel and the European countryside, saving their internal tanks for the fight. Imagine the mechanics of it. Thousands of aircraft lifting off from English airfields, carrying their own lifeline with them. As they approached the danger zone, where the German interceptors waited, the Mustang pilots would flip a switch. The clamps would release. The external tanks would tumble away, falling silently toward the earth below. Instantly, the aircraft became lighter, sleeker, and fully aerodynamic. The Mustang transformed from a long-haul traveler into the deadliest predator in the sky. This was the marriage of American industrial might and tactical brilliance. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, built under license by Packard in Detroit, hummed with a reliability that became legendary. It was a sound that meant safety for the bomber crews, who would look out their windows and smile at the sight of the silver escorts. For them, the Mustang was a guardian angel. For the enemy, that same smooth hum was the sound of inevitable defeat. The shockwaves of this arrival rippled all the way to the top of the German high command. Hermann Göring, the head of the Luftwaffe, was a man who had promised that enemy planes would never dominate the German skies. He had built his reputation on that promise. But as reports flooded in from the airfields, reports of American fighters diving and climbing over the capital itself, the reality became undeniable. There is a famous moment of clarity, recorded in history, where Göring looked up and saw the impossible. He saw the squadrons of Mustangs weaving protective patterns around the bombers, deep in the heart of the Reich. He later confessed that in that precise second, he knew the war was lost. He said, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." It wasn't a defeat on the battlefield yet, it was a defeat of the spirit. The illusion of safety was shattered. For the German pilots, the psychological impact was devastating. They were used to engaging heavy, slow bombers that could only defend themselves with defensive turrets. Now, they faced a plane that was faster than them, could turn tighter than them, and seemingly had endless fuel. The sky, which had been their sanctuary, had become a cage. Every cloud could hide a silver wing. Every mission became a gamble against superior odds. As the months passed, the sight of the silver planes became a constant. The roar of the Merlin engines became the soundtrack of the closing chapter of the war. But there is a strange calmness to be found in this history. It is the story of how the tide turned not through hatred, but through capability. through the sheer will to build a machine that could go the distance. Eventually, the skies cleared. The engines cooled. The Mustang earned its place in history, not just as a weapon, but as a symbol of reach. It proved that there was no distance too great, no horizon too far. Today, when we see a P-51 at an airshow, gleaming in the sun, we don't just see a plane. We see the moment the world changed. We see the beautiful, mechanical proof that perseverance can bridge any gap. And as the sun sets on this story, we are left with the quiet peace of a sky that is finally, and permanently, still. The arrival of the P-51 over Berlin wasn't just a military milestone, it was a logistical masterpiece. Before this moment, the United States Army Air Forces had been suffering unsustainable losses. In October 1943, during the infamous mission to Schweinfurt, 60 B-17s were shot down in a single afternoon. The dream of daylight precision bombing was dying. The German interceptors, armed with rockets and heavy cannons, were simply too effective once the short-range Spitfires and Thunderbolts had to turn back for England. But the Mustang changed the calculus of the entire air war. With the addition of the 108-gallon paper drop tanks, the P-51B and P-51D models had a combat radius of over 750 miles. This meant they could stay with the bombers for the entire duration of the mission, from the moment they crossed the coast of occupied France until they dropped their payloads over the capital of the Reich and returned home. By March of 1944, the Big Week operations saw thousands of Allied aircraft flooding German airspace. The Luftwaffe, which had previously been able to pick its battles, was now forced into a war of attrition it could not win. They were losing pilots faster than they could train them, while the American industrial machine was churning out hundreds of Mustangs every month. The silver planes became a relentless tide. The engineering brilliance of the P-51 was its laminar flow wing, a design that reduced drag and allowed for incredible speed and fuel efficiency. When combined with the high-altitude performance of the Packard-built Merlin engine, the Mustang could outperform almost anything the Germans could put in the air. Even when the Germans introduced the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter, the Mustang pilots adapted, catching the jets while they were most vulnerable during takeoff and landing. This dominance meant that by the time of the D-Day landings in June 1944, the Luftwaffe was almost non-existent over the beaches of Normandy. General Eisenhower famously told his troops, "If you see an airplane over you, it will be American." This total air supremacy started in the skies over Berlin months earlier, on the day the first silver silhouettes appeared where they were never supposed to be. As you reflect on this journey, consider the quiet determination of the designers at North American Aviation and the bravery of the young pilots who flew for 8 hours in a cramped, freezing cockpit. They weren't just flying a machine, they were carrying the weight of a turning tide. The Mustang was the little friend that stayed until the end. Now, as the narrative draws to a close, let the sounds of the past fade into a peaceful silence. The skies are no longer a theater of conflict, but a vast, open canvas of blue. The lessons of history remain, reminding us that through innovation and courage,